Well, for regular listeners of this podcast, it will come as no great surprise to see just how unreliable we've been recently in recording and putting out the podcast. We have been blaming the state of the world and all the controversies and things that are going on around the virus lately. And that's been true to a fair extent. But this week, A, it's great to be back. But B, Titus O'Reilly, we have a decent excuse this time.
Well, I'm the Conor McKenna of the podcast. I broke protocol.
Well, you've just spent a couple of weeks in Ireland, have you?
No, I actually I got sick, but I had to go get a test, but it came back negative. But it took days to come back.
Well, that's
because I am in a hot spot.
That is good news on one hand that you did test negative.
Turned out I was just hungover. No, but I wasn't. I just had I just think I had just the normal, winter
run-of-the-mill cold.
I didn't feel that bad, but I was being careful. And then once you get it in your head and you're waiting on it, you kind of want to, do the right thing, but then you just don't want to, spread it. So you kind of don't do anything. So it's very boring. It must be hard thinking,
geez, what if I do get the positive? What do I do then, you know?
Yeah, well, do you know what came into my mind is if you get a positive, the annoying thing must be, it must be, and I'll bow to your knowledge on this, it must be like if you've got syphilis and you have to go tell everyone that you've got it, all the people you've slept with, and I imagine that's very awkward.
There's worse STDs that
is there? I'm not au fait with all of them.
Just having to spread the news on. So
that's what it's like. There's suddenly in your head you start going, who have I seen? When I see them last?
Yeah.
Is this going to be a problem? So you sort of do, and then you just think, God, what a hassle.
Yeah.
But I haven't really seen that many people, so I wasn't particularly worried about it. And I didn't go out while I had that period.
Waiting.
Oh, the minute I got it, went to the pub. The minute it came back negative, because by then I was well. By then I was over the cold.
Yeah.
But it's not a fun experience.
No.
The waiting in the car is the more annoying bit.
Oh, yeah. What did you have to queue up for one of those drive-thrus, did you?
Yeah. And
so and I know there's been waiting lists, but they're going through hundreds and thousands of people. So do they sort of write down, obviously, your name and date of birth and all your details on the tube that they use?
So they sort of take all your details and... so I obviously gave a false name in case it did come back. Yeah. But it's it's pretty quick. Like in terms of once they do it all and everything. I think they're getting lots of practice.
Well, that's true. Who knows what the hell is going to happen with all?
Well, we're going to get into this, the impact on everything. But so that was that was like the last week and a bit. So it's been
because we were going to do a show last week and then
when we had the lockdown threat, because I'm in an area, you're not. I don't think you're near any hot areas, are you?
No, we've got, I think, no cases down there.
And I'm not
they're just not allowed by the council down there.
They've just said no.
Yeah.
Where we are now is it's not exactly it's sort of, how there's sort of the suburbs that they're categorising as.
Yeah.
I'm sort of the next level down.
Right.
But enough that when they were making the announcement yesterday, I was thinking we could be included in this.
Check that postcode.
Which is super annoying.
Oh, it would be. It would be.
To get these...
I mean, if when I leave here, if there's a SWAT team out the front, I know we've crossed the line.
You might have to move in, quarantine for 2 weeks. There'll be a podcast every day. But the other thing that I find... because COVID's going beautifully.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought it was after the first quarter or a down and out, but haven't they rallied?
Oh, they have. They have. They've come out. They've seen the premiership quarter, and against the tide of things these days, they've kicked 7 against the wind.
Well, in Victoria, the backline's really let us down, which is the security guards that were guarding the hotels. They seem to have...
They're feeding them security guards. It's like the security guards at my local supermarket at the moment.
Yeah.
They're about as threatening as poodles.
Well, they literally got the companies that do 7-Elevens and all that. And you've seen how much the guys who pat you down as you go to the MCG pay real attention.
Yeah.
Is that a bazooka, sir? No, it's my thermos. No worries.
In you go.
In you go.
In you go. Have a nice day, sir. Yeah, no.
So it's not hard. It's not like no one's, I think, that surprised.
I mean, why didn't they just get the Hells Angels in? But the guys that back in the day that used to stand on the door at the tunnel, you didn't mess with those blokes, let me tell you.
Well, I actually think to get the numbers down, it's too high scoring, COVID. So we should appoint Ross Lyon as coach of it.
Just get it to work in zones.
Yeah, that's right. They'll stop it in seconds. So before we get into the bad news, because look, let's be honest, there's only bad news.
Yeah, and we should point out too that we are in fact wearing masks when we record this.
We wear masks.
Not your surgical masks, more your Halloween type of Friday the 13th type of gear, just for the sheer fun of it. Yeah.
And we've been doing that for years. So we should just let's cover off the good news, because one, it's good news, and two, it'll be brief.
Short and sharp. Yeah.
But Australia won the women with New Zealand, joined the women's 2023 World Cup for soccer/football, depending. Yeah. I love in Australia, you can call it soccer or football depending on who you want to annoy.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can annoy both.
I mean, this is great news.
It's terrific news.
The funny thing was, I wasn't even aware that we were sort of really in the market for this, or a real chance.
It had been bubbling along. It had been bubbling along a bit, but it hadn't been quite the. It was all out with the men's one a bit too a few years ago. I think people have been a bit distracted too.
There hasn't been much good news for Australian soccer recently, so this has really hit the nail on the head.
This is much needed. Yeah. As usual, you had all the. We must have got our bribe strategy right. Yeah. Is all I can say. But it is fantastic news to get it, and we beat Colombia. Yeah. And the funny thing is, it got close towards the end because we got the Asian Football Confederation behind us. They control 7 votes. Yeah. And then we got support from, I think, Africa and Central and North America and the Caribbean and various things. But FIFA sort of pushed on for the Europeans to vote for Colombia, which, because the Colombian bid apparently came in very poor on infrastructure and a whole bunch of things. Like, it was just an easy, it should be Australia. But won.
Cheap cocaine usually gets you over the line.
Well, we won 22 votes to 13 to Colombia. This is Australia and New Zealand. But it got close because UEFA, swung behind it.
And the Poms did too, didn't they?
Yeah, a bunch of them. And, when there's these, I know it's a lot of back scratching and we'll vote for you now, especially if we can vote for you now and you're not going to get it because we know the numbers. Yeah. But you'll have to be in our debt sort of thing. So maybe there's a bit of that going on. I like to think it's more likely it's bribery. But...
when we had a crack for the Men's World Cup a few years ago.
That was total.
And that was $45 million worth of bribes that were just completely went out the window and up in smoke.
Do you think Australians are just not good at bribing?
Well,
compared to some other countries?
Yeah, you see, I think in Australia, we've been good at bribes, but on an individual level. Not a government,
not a team level.
Not a government or team level.
It breaks our structure.
You look back at, Russ Hinds in Queensland.
Oh, yeah, there was some good
dodgy
Queensland did some great stuff.
There's some very good individual bribes.
Yeah.
But on a,
national
level, I don't think we're very good at it.
Yeah.
Compared to some of the South American and European countries.
Yeah, I think we're the fact that bribes are not part of your day-to-day life as much in Australia as in some other countries where everything is a negotiation.
Well, see, bribes virtually on an individual level here in Australia these days amount to a slab. You do a bloke a favour, he gives you a slab.
Yeah.
Now, that's probably not quite enough to get you a World Cup.
We said like
a slab of VB is not, it's not the same as a briefcase full of gold ingots.
Or from Colombia of cocaine.
Exactly.
So anyway, we just got over the line, but you got to look, when 2 bids are so disproportionately not ranked on all their technical merits anywhere close, the fact that a bunch of them voted for the lower one just shows you that,
it's still all over the joint.
I'm not saying soccer's bad here. Every international sporting event is. We've said this before. I don't think you can run a Olympic movement or FIFA or any of these without being a bit corrupt.
No, of course not.
I'm not excusing that. I just never seen it done.
Look, on the bright side, when this, I know it's 3 years away, so you would hope things are straightened out a bit by then.
Oh.
But if it is, it will be a big event. There's no question.
Oh, it's going to be terrific.
You can see how big the Women's World Cricket Cup was just a few months ago.
Well, who do you prefer to watch, the Matildas or the Socceroos?
Oh, the Matildas any day.
By a mile. They're more exciting to watch.
Yeah.
They've got quite likely. They've got Sam Kerr. They're quite likely to win.
Yeah. Yeah, how big will that be if they're playing
massive
in the final at the G? Or will it be at the G? Or
no,
will it be
I think
Sydney?
Melbourne's been overlooked for most of it, which is often the case when it comes to football. So anyway, that's great news. Now we get into the real negative news, of which there's plenty. So we're recording this on Wednesday, midday Wednesday.
Yeah.
So the odds of what we're saying now being accurate whenever, I've no clue.
By the weekend,
not that our stuff has ever been accurate, but of what we're talking about being true. So, basically, I mean, so to avoid having to go through chapter and verse and everything, basically, the spike in Victoria has led to basically Queensland, South Australia, range of others closing borders with us or delaying the opening of borders, depending on the case. New South Wales are telling Victorians not to go up to New South Wales for AFL games or to go up, and they're saying don't accept people and all this sort of stuff.
There seems a disproportionate reaction against Victoria from all the other states here. Not from a COVID or dangerous point of view.
Yeah.
Just the fact that they're having a good crack at Victoria.
But do you know what? It's like you watch those shows like The Walking Dead where it just shows this like everyone, the world quickly crumbles into every person for themselves or groups of themselves. And you think, I hope we're a bit better than that, humans. And then the minute this has happened, it's like, oh yeah, that is reality.
There's like just a wasteland of zombies walking around.
And not to get on my high horse, but I'm definitely not getting on my horse because Victorians would do it if it was the other way around. If this was New South Wales going the way Victoria are and we were okay, we would be lording it over
I'd
them.
never have a crack at South Australia or
Adelaide. You never have. You've always been a big ally. They often say that. So I kind of get it, but it is incredibly frustrating There is an interesting thing I think is happening around this, and this will lead me into the next bit about the AFL, where, because of all these closures and all these, and the border closures are like kind of really popular. It's my theory that, closing borders anywhere is just popular.
Yeah.
Like to anyone.
People like the sound of it.
It's what it gets down to? It's down to that bit of our brain that loves the idea that you can get into an exclusive bit of a nightclub that no one else can get into. Yeah. And once you're in, you don't want anyone else to get in because it's
like being a member of the MCC.
Yeah. And that's what everyone's like. So WA and South Australia are like, well, we're not opening our borders. And they're like,
you ain't coming in here.
Yeah. And people kind of like that. But the problem is, you see this with the AFL, is you can't then do a whole heap of things.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of people who are kind of laughing at Victoria, and rightly so, because Victoria have made dog's breakfast of this, especially with the hotel quarantining stuff. The thing about it is, there's a lot of people that seem to not care that much, and you're like, you the people that have jobs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there who don't have jobs, and none of this is good. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
The border's been closed is terrible. Victoria being terrible. It actually has a real impact on people, which is interesting where we get to, the whole fixture's been rearranged for next week, and then the rounds after that, 6 and 7.
Don't know what's going to happen after that. Yeah.
And they're saying it could change daily. The interesting thing is you now got this other thing, which is players are now potentially opting out of the hub. So there's a few who are saying...
See, there was some talk of that a month ago, of players going, I don't know if I want to go to a hub.
Yeah.
Now it's ruined its ugly head.
Well, Trent Cotchin is apparently a genuine chance to not go if they... I think South Australia, they were looking at sending them at some point.
Yeah.
You know how sometimes... I know you're not allowed to do this in sports media. You got to have one very clear black or white view of things.
Yes.
But sometimes you kind of, in your head, you're balancing two separate arguments and you don't really know where you land on it yet. You're sort of like, So there's one side of me where it thinks most people can't work. A lot of people, can't work at the moment.
Yep.
These AFL players have a chance to keep a big industry going. A lot of people's jobs depend on it. They'll get paid. They should push on with it, and sort of saying, well, I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's sort of almost selfish because it's not about you. And there's a lot of people out there who'd love to be in the position where if they got told, hey, if you go for 3 weeks here and work.
That's pretty much the way I'm feeling about it.
You would go, absolutely, And so there's an element there where you kind of go, and then I look at Trent Cotchin and I think, and this isn't to beat up on Trent Cotchin, I know he's got young kids and stuff, and at a time where it's going like it is with this pandemic, I mean, I can understand with childcare needs and being around your family is actually kind of important as well. So I can see that side of it a bit, but it's easy for Trent Cotchin to say, well, no, it's fine, I'll just sit out for 3 months or for the rest of the season or whatever, because he can afford to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all his financial details.
It'd be fair to assume.
But he's probably more like, because I know heaps of people can't pay their rent at the moment.
Yeah.
And they don't have the option to do stuff like this. Like there's a luxury in a bit of this, which, On the flip side of all that, though, the other bit that does stick out in my head, and I say this is very much like, and I get you need to try and keep this industry going, because like all industries, I don't think football's special. I think if you can keep an industry going at the moment because of all that reason, people not having jobs and stuff, if you can do it safely, you should. But on the flip side, you kind of go, look, if a player said instead of, it's not so much I just don't want to go to the hub, but why are we doing this when this season is just ridiculous?
It's pretty much
shot, guys. I'm not even convinced it's going. It's a lot of it's crappy on the field. It's all over the shop. It might not even get to its end. We're going to end up playing till bloody December at this rate. I can see that point of view of just going, it's not so much that I want it, but like, I can see players thinking, and sometimes I think this myself at the moment, I just go, are we just tilting at windmills here? Is this just stupid to even try and keep this going? Now, I balance that with you need to keep the money coming in.
Yeah. So I can see the point of players saying that, but I would say to the players, it's not your decision or whether it keeps going, and so be guided by the AFL here. And, did you hear Lachie Neale from Brisbane yesterday? He was very firm that, I think his words were, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he said, football has been very, very good to me.
Yeah.
And this is my way of paying back. If I've got to go and sit in a hotel room for 4 weeks to play footy, well, so be it.
Well, that is
and
the one thing.
I know it's a simplistic attitude, but I reckon, amongst, as you say, so many industries and people are losing their jobs and can't pay their rent, pay their mortgages or buy food for their kids or what have you. These blokes, professional sports people, anyone in the AFL is on far higher than the average wage. Boys, suck it up and go where you got to go. The one person I do feel a bit sorry for is old Travis Old in the AFL.
Having to do
he's got to do the fixtures. He's got to redo them every day. I saw a picture of him the other day. He looked like Woody Harrelson in Zombieland. Walking around with, he's got scabs on his face. He's carrying an axe. His hair's all over the joint.
Yeah. I know, it is interesting though, like about what you say. I mean, because I do, as someone I've had about 95% of my year's wages or what I normally just gone.
Yeah.
Like not to come back. And then I look at, with all this stuff happening at the moment, I look at next year.
Yeah.
And I go, there's no certainty the football's going to be normal next year.
Well, that's right.
By any stretch of the imagination. And realistically, when's a vaccination coming? I mean, it's. I've read a bit about this, and when I say that, I mean I don't mean I'm any expert, but the experts seem to all say the difficulty of the vaccination is, one, we haven't even developed it yet, but once you do, it's the logistics of then getting it out in mass amounts that will have this impact that gets us back to what was sort of roughly normal. So you're kind of looking at this stretch, and I sort of think with the footballers, I can understand them not wanting to go in the hubs for months and months and months on end.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. I mean, how long are they? Is opting out of hubs realistic when this could be going on next year? Like, do they want to shut down it forever? Like, and this is the hard nature of this: is we don't know when it's going to end.
Well, you see, I mean, when this all began and the first lockdown came through, I think everyone assumed we're going to have to ride this out for 3, 4, maybe 6 or 8 weeks, and then it'll be fine. And now we're seeing, well, it ain't exactly fine. And this is the thing that's going through people's minds. Well, how long is this going to go on for? And you're quite right. Maybe next year the footy season is in an even worse potential shape than it is this year or everything else. What happens
you can't
then?
know, can you? Because unless you're like New Zealand that can sort of suppress it completely, which they've done a great job, but there's 3 million people in New Zealand. I mean, it's nowhere near as densely populated. It's a very different situation. Like, I don't know if any state in Australia is going to ever fully get to, especially New South Wales and Victoria, to zero.
Of course
and it does, and we've seen how quick it can all break off, which is interesting because you had Steele Sidebottom's now under investigation for
he's going to get suspended,
breaching the COVID protocols, and he and Lyndon Dunn both. Now they went to visit originally Jeremy Howe,
I think,
which is, to me, I understand why they want to do that, but they apparently used an Uber at some point, which they're not meant to, and the reason they did that is they'd been drinking. Then they went and Sidebottom went and hung out with Daniel Wells, who, of course, is not... He works with the Magpies, but it's not in the bubble, so he's not allowed to be visited. It's kind of... it's kind of interesting, like, on one way, it's incredibly selfish, but I also think it's very hard, this system that relies on a bunch of 20-year-old blokes doing the right thing. Because footballers have never... they breach every rules all the time. Exhibit
A, Lockie Hunter,
Yeah.
I mean, he's just been charged recently, but the Steele Sidebottom and Lyndon Dunn thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, mate. I think...
I'm not condoning it, by the way. I just think it's...
Yeah, but I reckon they've done, and this is not dissimilar to a lot of people in the community, and especially young blokes who are, in their early to late 20s.
Yeah.
They knew that they weren't supposed to go see Jeremy Howe or go around and see Daniel Wells, but they've rolled the dice and thought, we'll be right.
Yeah.
Caught the Uber. We've been on the beers, but the Uber's fine.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I don't know whether they rang up Collingwood on the Sunday and said, you probably should know we did the wrong thing last night.
Yeah.
Or how they got caught. But Collingwood then, of course, self-reported to the AFL. So you'd have to say Dunny and Steele Sidebottom will get a couple of weeks holiday for this.
Well, it was weird because Connor McKenna got a week.
Yeah.
But then it was, for the week he was already in quarantine. Like, I know this happens all the time, but it's like, it's that thing where you're getting... But it's not an injury. It's like when it's like when the suspension falls and you would have missed anyway through injury.
Yeah.
It kind of doesn't send that strong a message. Like, if you're going to be forced to quarantine anyway, not allowed to play, then the suspension
is completely irrelevant.
It's just technical. Like, but it is just like, the longer it goes on. I mean, imagine if I said to you, I came to you with a business model and said, look, our business model is predicated on 800 different blokes, all in their 20s to 30. Who are bored a lot of the time, not doing anything wrong. Yeah. You'd go, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah, most of them, they got too much time on their hands. Most of them on $500,000 a year.
Yeah. They've never shown great
judgment.
Well, and there's a lot of AFL players, not all, like there's some you meet that are very sensible. They, of course, don't get in the media very often, but a lot of these guys think they are special and the rules don't apply to them.
Yeah.
So you get that all the time.
Sure.
So it's sort of all over the shop. So that's the one thing about all this is, like, part of me is going, look, we need to keep pushing air. Like, we need to keep pushing air to keep this industry going because it employs so many people beyond the footballers too. But then I also think, are we just trying too hard to make this happen?
Mm.
Are we a bit overeager?
What do you reckon if things blow up as far as border closures and stuff like this over the next 3 weeks, at what point do you reckon the AFL is suddenly going to go, oh, bugger it?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, at what point do you get... I mean, this is all it's sort of almost pointless speculating because it's so ridiculous about what we don't know. But mean, say New South Wales have a sudden outbreak.
Yeah.
Or say Victoria's gets worse, or say, or Victoria, so there's all these scenarios that no one actually really knows what's going to happen. Like, I think part of the thing that's been shocking with Victoria is we were seen to have the harshest rules. So everyone was like, I think Victorians thought a bit like we'd done really well. But I also think you let this run another 6 weeks, it wouldn't be beyond possibility that another state has a series of outbreaks and it runs away there too.
Well, I'll tell you something. My brother-in-law lives in Byron Bay.
Yeah.
And they're petrified that there's going to be an outbreak there because it is completely full of Victorians at the moment because they can't go to Queensland.
Right.
But they've been allowed into New South Wales, sort of up until yesterday.
Yeah.
And so everyone's going to Byron because, hey, it's a great place, and at this time of year it's even better.
Yeah.
But he said the joint is absolutely crawling with people from Melbourne.
Yeah.
Even more so than it normally is, because he said half of them usually go to Noosa or the Gold Coast or, somewhere else on the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah.
He said they're all in Byron. He said if there's going to be an outbreak in New South Wales, he said it's not going to be Sydney. It's going to be in the Byron area. So watch this space.
But the thing is, you only need a couple of people somewhere. They go and see a few people.
Yeah.
And if it's not detected relatively quickly, it goes around really fast. So that's the problem with this.
Well, you can see that with all the families in Melbourne that have caused the lockdown here.
Yeah. And so I kind of look at it and go, when it comes back to the footy season, like, at what point? So say we suddenly have to ban pause the season for a few rounds. How late in the year do you let this run before you're really starting to compromise the next season and you're really going,
You're compromising the next season. You're going into the cricket season,
Yeah, so there's got to be at some point like a hard go no go line where you start to go, or you just go straight into finals really early, which will be ridiculous because people will sort of watch it. But if it's like, this team's won. This team's 6-3 playing this team, and that's all they played for the whole year.
Yeah, if they don't get their 17-game season out, if it drops down to 13 or 14, say, I mean, they talk about having an asterisk beside this alleged premiership. People will just go, look, why don't we just call the whole of 2020 a sort of a scratch match, a practice season, a round robin kind of thing.
I'm almost at the point where I think there'd almost be better to pull together a 2-month, and I know the border closures are now making this a bit harder, but a 2-month proper State of Origin tournament or something. Like something that is sort of enjoyable, interesting, a bit different. It can be more flexible. And because you're getting to the point where it is becoming a bit like all over the shop.
Or just bring back AFLX.
Well, I think
less players,
Well, getting to that, Alistair Clarkson's had a huge go about how the AFL is terrible. The rules are terrible. It's dour, low-scoring footy. All this sort of stuff.
Terrible. Yeah,
everything's terrible. Real skies falling stuff. It made me wonder what he was trying to distract everyone from. But he mentioned the Geelong-Melbourne game.
Yeah,
which was horrendous.
It was a terrible game of football.
But you and I have both seen games that bad over the last 10 years fairly regularly.
Yeah.
I wasn't like... I mean, a lot of those players... This is my thing a little bit, right, is there is... A lot of the problem of the game is, one, the coaches. The coaches have decided it's better to almost, it's better to defend than to attack at all and teach this very safe thing and then complain about it, which is kind of interesting. But also... The major problem, I think, in the AFL at the moment more than anything else, and people talk about it being the rules and all this sort of stuff, is there's just too many players in the AFL because we've got so many teams, which means there's a bunch of players in every team, but around the whole league, and sometimes they coalesce, whose skills are just not up to playing at this level. So the amount of times in that Geelong-Melbourne game, you would have what were good pieces of play would break down after the third sort of bit of movement.
Yeah.
Because a player can't hit a handball to someone a metre away from them,
the fourth or fifth handball,
even under no pressure, and both sides did that. So there's a lot of it that's the skills of the players is the reason the game's so terrible at times, don't you reckon?
Oh, it is. I mean, it's the skills of the players, but it's also it's back from coaching strategies, and also when you go back to training, if you watch an AFL team train, they do their drills and they do this and they do lots of running and stoppages and stuff like that. But there's very, very little of practicing hitting a target or goal kicking or the basic skills. Now, I think it's probably fair to assume, and a lot of coaches assume this, not just senior coaches, but assistant coaches, that by the time a kid gets drafted and is invited into the big league, they should be able to kick and handball pretty well. That's not my job, is to teach this kid how to kick.
Yeah.
He should know by now, or he should be playing in the under-18s or the VFL. So there's all that. But I also, as you said, you get a bit cynical when Clarko, who is, well, not even arguably, he is the best coach of the last 20 years, when he starts saying there's something wrong with the game, you go, well, Clarko, you're probably half responsible for the way these teams are playing now, so it's a bit rich to be complaining. The one interesting thing I did think he said was when Hawthorn, they had 69 tackles last week, and not one of them was paid for holding the ball.
Oh, yeah, I'm not totally disagreeing with him.
Yeah.
Like, I think there are a few little bits of the game that have always... I think the umpiring is often terrible because the umpires are given, like, a basically impossible task with the constant tinkering, the amount of rules,
and different
how interpretive
things every
it is.
week.
Yeah,
you know?
How interpretive it is, how, like... and I think the holding the ball thing could be... So some of those do make sense to me a little bit. But I'm always a bit wary because there's this thing where people talk about things that are going to, like flooding was going to kill the game, sliding and, all these things throughout your life. How many things have been the death of the game? Yeah. Congestion. You can find articles going back to like the 19th century saying that congestion is ruining, Victorian football or whatever at the time. So none of this is new. That game is, for a game that's so healthy, it's amazing how much it's always dying. Yeah. Then the other thing is people talk about these glory years of the 90s or the 80s or the 70s and football was better then. It's like music. It's like, it seems to correspond to when people first originally fell in love with the game. So if you fell in love with the game in the 90s or the 80s, you go, no better era. Oh,
there's no question. And then people go, and you look back at the 80s and they show the 89 grand final. Yeah. Not every game is as good as the 89
grand. Well, you're exactly right.
And it's like you say, it's music. It's like for every Beatles, there was the Monkees.
Yeah, and far worse bands that you don't even...
Than the Monkees, So, I agree with that.
Because also every game you see on all the highlights from the 80s, like you were saying, one, they didn't film every game as much going back if you go back far enough. But two, whenever Fox Footy or Channel 7 or anyone shows an old, even on YouTube, the ones people upload and go to the trouble of and all that, they upload the cracking games. They don't take the game where it's like, hey, watch Fitzroy get absolutely pants by Collingwood by 100 points.
At Victoria Park.
Yeah, and I doubt, although I'm happy for listeners to tell me I'm wrong, I doubt even Geelong fans pull out the Geelong smashing Melbourne a few years ago by 100 and whatever it was of what tried to wipe it from my memory. Because you don't go back and watch those games that much. Like, unless that was a grand final, you just... What's the point? So you filter all this stuff out of your brain. But I do think there is some legitimate concerns about things. But I've always thought that the thing that never gets talked about is the addition of the expansion teams, and this is not to blame those expansion teams so much, but I think we now have a league that's bigger than the talent pool, and you have a lot of duds that are floating around who can't really execute.
I'll tell you what,
because when you see two good teams, sorry to cut you, but when you go to see two really good teams go against each other, the game's glorious. The rules are the same, the umpire's the same, but it's great. It's not the problem.
Yeah. No, I was going to say the interesting thing would be an interesting stat, which I don't know if they've even been kept, or is you look at the number of players who get drafted, play less than 10 games and get delisted. I would venture, and again, I'll be corrected if I'm wrong here, is that there's more of them these days who come into the system, get found out fairly quickly, and they're back playing in the Ammos next year.
Yeah.
That's not to say these kids can't play the game, but
But a lot of them also stay because a team doesn't have the option.
Yeah.
Of like you've got to hire a certain amount of players every year to be able to get officially to get through the season. You've got to field a certain amount. So you don't have the luxury like you would in other areas of life.
Yeah.
If you're running a cafe and you hire 2 people who are hopeless and making the actual cafe run worse, you don't have to keep them because you have to field 10 people in the cafe every day. You can drop back to 8, do more with less. You might still look to recruit. You might be understaffed. But it's better to have, you don't have to, it's not a charity where you have to maintain a certain amount. But AFL clubs don't have that option.
No.
They have to field 18 players.
Yeah, they have to fill a
22,
certain number on their list.
Yeah, every time. So that, and then you got injuries and all that sort of stuff. So that means so every club has those problems, but then the depth is checked even more when you suddenly have 18 teams. Because I reckon there's at least 2 AFL teams worth. They're not all playing in the same AFL clubs, obviously, but of players out there who really shouldn't be in a top flight professional sport.
And most of them were at the Gold Coast last year.
Well, they occasionally seem to coalesce.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Like, do you reckon that's a fair estimate? Like,
probably. I don't know whether it's
like that would fix
2 whole teams worth.
That would fix to me a lot of the problems if you just actually. And I'm not saying this is an easy thing to do because it means getting rid of clubs, and I'm not advocating that necessarily. But that is a problem for the league, and the problem is everyone focuses on rule changes because the other one is like systemic long-term requirement of fixing. Where the other one's just to complain, go, it's holding the ball or it's this. And they tweak that and nothing changes. And
the other thing, as far as player depth across the entire competition, is reflected, I think, in every year when clubs are suggesting, can we have a mid-season draft?
Yeah.
Can we have another pre-season draft? Can we have a pre-draft draft almost?
Yeah.
They continually wanting to be bringing more players in because I think you'll find, well, each club, they draft, say, half a dozen players a year. If they get 2 good ones, they're in front of most.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4 of them don't see the light of day or end up 6-game players.
Yeah.
And aren't good enough.
Yeah. No, I just find the debate around all this of how to fix footy is very kind of limited to a few things that are easy fixes. It's a great media copy, but
across the board.
But when's a rule change ever? I mean, I know some rule changes have improved footy. I'm not saying it never works, but there's few of them that like make the big impact people think. And as the AFL's rules to increase scoring showed last season, they often do the complete
opposite. Yeah, exactly.
Lucky Hunter's been charged now for his little drink driving, careless driving, failure to give his name in a collision, and failure to render assistance after a collision for his little journey back in April, where he broke covert things.
April, wasn't it? Was it that long ago?
Yeah. Might as well be a decade ago.
Wonder if his car's been fixed yet, for all the other cars.
So that's a fair bit of, that's an expensive night out he had.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
God, he was lucky, wasn't he?
Oh, look, he was lucky he didn't
kill someone.
Yeah. I mean, he's obviously going to have to pay for a bunch of wrecked cars as well and fines.
We also had this week Essendon's Zach Merritt.
What did you think of this one?
Well, the thing about this is he hit Jack Silvani, for anyone didn't see this. It ended up with him getting a cracked rib and a bruised lung. He had to go to the hospital. So it's this thing, we've talked about this before, right? Like this issue gets into the whole issue of intent, result, like whether if he'd have done this and Jack had have been absolutely fine, then everyone would have gone, well, what's in it? But he did. It just shows you that we've talked about this. If you swing a punch, you're not in full control of
There's
the
every
outcome.
chance that it might end badly.
Yeah,
which
so
it
when
has.
people go, oh, it's soft and all this, and I get that, I get that often this doesn't, but you kind of go, yeah, but at the same time, like, we're also, these same people will say to you, oh, these people who can one punch people, they're awful people. So you kind of go, well, you're either for or against people swinging punches.
Yeah.
because they can't fully control the outcome once you swing a punch.
I must admit, I was watching it live, and when Silvani sort of was obviously in pain and dropped to his knees, I remember thinking, really? I reckon Joe Silvani caught harder hits than that walking onto the sale of the century set. But as you say, Merritt obviously got him in the right place.
Well, that's what I mean about a punch. Like a punch, and we've seen this with people who've ended up killed or, from a one punch. I mean, it doesn't always have to be. And my thing it comes down to more than anything else is it's just there's no reason for Merritt to do it. He's done it more than one. This is not the first time he's done it. Like, why are you running around punching blokes? Like there's plenty of ways through tackling and hip and shoulders and stuff that you can exert a physical presence. I don't mind those sort of melees we've been having lately.
Yeah, they've been good.
They're all fun. I'm not against the
those.
Physical nature, but a punch is kind of like you kind of only got yourself to blame a bit.
Yeah. And how many people have been saying, probably just in this last week, these things, and I don't mean just the punch to the ribs, these things happen 30 to 40 times a game. There's all sorts of things that happen 30 to 40 times a game.
Well, I mean, that's
except kicking goals.
That's like they all talk about those stuff which you instantly go, no, they don't, because there'd be fines left, right and centre. Yeah. But when Hopewade did his famous finger up the backside trick, his coach in the post-match game said, "Oh, this happens like 4 or 5 times every single NRL game."
And every NRL player's going,
it doesn't. No, it doesn't. So that's
I don't do it, and no one's ever done it to me.
It's the most famous defence in sport, really, and then people use it in all sorts of things. Which is, if you get caught out for doing something, say, yeah, but that guy does it too. Everyone's doing it. It's like when kids say, you go, well, Tommy stole one too. Yeah, well, he's an idiot too. He's in trouble too. But people, when grown adults
soon to be known as the steel side bottom argument, I think.
Matt Rowell, we were talking about how good he is, and you like the fact he tucks in his jumper.
Yeah.
And what caught your eye with him this week? That Freo's...
Well, Matt DeBoer, who was taken over, I think, from Hayden Ballantyne as the most annoying tagger in the game.
Serial pest, do we call him?
Serial pest. That's the phrase I was looking for. Matt DeBoer. But I admire Matt DeBoer. I reckon he's a great tagger and a hard nut. And I've never met him, but he seems like he'd be a really good bloke. But Matt Rowell, he obviously read during the week that Matt Rowell, who's had 2 or 3 of the best games to start a career in probably the history of the game.
Yeah.
He tucks in his jumper. It's an old-fashioned thing to do. He said he's done it since Auskick, and he's not going to stop now. And he was playing pretty well again on the weekend. And Matt DeBoer's given the task of tagging him. What is first thing DeBoer does? Pull his jumper out of his shorts. And I thought, he's thought this one through.
Didn't really work, though.
Didn't work, because then Matt Rowell kicked 2 fantastic goals on his left foot.
One you got to say about him, he's 18. So, I mean, how good is it's already well spoken about. But he makes you talk. He's a guy who's living up to hype, like he's setting his own hype rather than... But
and Matt DeBoer didn't, when asked about pulling the jumper out, he didn't say, well, it happens 30 or 40 times a game. Maybe Zach Merritt should have pulled Silvani's jumper out of his shorts.
Yeah, there's other ways to annoy people.
Yeah.
No, I do. But good. Matt Rowell, he's absolutely amazing. I mean, imagine being that good that early at something.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Ridiculous.
I saw him play a couple of years ago in a schoolboy game.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Where did he go to school?
He went to Carey. Him and Noah Anderson, who went number 2.
That's right. Yeah, they were both the package deal.
And he was good. The 2 of them together at schoolboy level, even though this is pretty high level schoolboy in the APS.
Yeah.
But you could see
they were better.
But on the other side of the coin, and the other team they were playing against had Matt and Ben King and Luke Davies-Uniacke and Andrew Brayshaw. So it was a pretty high standard game of footy.
Yeah.
But still, Rowell and Anderson were the difference between the two sides that day.
Yeah, right. Now, getting on to this was sort of rushed through last week. That in netball, they've announced that for the Super Netball competition next year, they're going to, for the rest of the 2020 season, I should say, they're going to bring in this controversial 2-point super shot. Now,
will that be a super shot?
Well, this is the thing. the super shot will come into play. So if anyone knows, there's the circle up the front with a goal attack, goal shooter, and like a 3-point line, it's 1.9 metres away, but like that, it's going to act like almost like a 3-pointer.
Yeah.
But it will only work in the last 5 minutes of each quarter, and has to be put up by a goal attack or goal shooter on the edge of the circle. Doesn't this it just smacks of the AFLX?
Oh,
like just rule change,
written all over
rule change, and I can kind of where it becomes gimmicky to me more than anything else. I'm not saying because having an idea of a 2-pot, it just copies the 3-point shot. So it's not that in itself you're kind of used to. But the just the last 5 minutes is to me this when it's just people have
trying to manufacture excitement.
Yeah,
in a game which probably doesn't need it. I mean, netball's travelling along pretty well and has
still
done
the test of time,
for many years. Yeah. It doesn't need it. And a lot of the players aren't happy about it.
They're furious because it seems that they basically didn't tell the stakeholders in the game, whether it's players and a whole bunch of other people, and the Players Association, a bunch of other key people, they basically didn't consult. They just came out and announced they were doing it.
You're sure the AFL's not behind this?
It is so out of the AFL's playbook. It's like tinkering for tinkering's sake.
And when it was announced last week, I remember seeing the story on the Channel 9 News, and Tony Jones, old TJ, and I actually scribbled this down at the time. He said, this could start a netball war.
Well, he's not right. It's actually got people so fired up because they've got they've got a competition committee which has all players and the Players Association and various people on it. And they were told they didn't find out until 10:30 on the Tuesday that it was about to be announced.
Yeah.
And they didn't find out through their role on the competition committee. One of them found out, Joe Weston, who's Diamonds defender, found out through an hour before the public, and that was in her capacity as Vice President of the Players Association. So she didn't even find out about it all. It was just suddenly done. And it's not like they have tested it in they had that fast version of netball a while ago, so it's been tested very briefly. But suddenly to just say this is now part of it is...
It's just a little bizarre for mine.
But do you also think there's this thing where it's like some administrators don't have faith in their own game, and rather than actually taking responsibility and going, we're not building the grassroots, or we're not doing the marketing right, or we're not doing a whole thing, they go, oh no, the product's the problem, not the work we're doing, the product's the problem.
And again, we've said this on numerous occasions about many sports, is that they're just not administered that well in Australia, you know?
But it's an easy out to it's like a tradesman blaming their tools. When they say,
exactly
why
right.
are you not more popular? And you go, oh, it's the sport's fault. We need to change the sport.
Yeah.
We need to bring more excitement into it. When it's really like, you haven't marketed it well. You maybe went on to, this isn't the case with netball, but you maybe went on to pay-per-view and therefore, or not pay-per-view, but pay TV, so most people couldn't see you, and that was a problem, or years of mismanagement of administrators. They go, no, we need a goals count for 2 5-minute frenzy period.
It's the game at fault. Whereas I guarantee if you drive around any capital city in Australia on a Saturday morning, all you see is, I was going to say millions, but tens of thousands of schoolgirls playing netball. And none of them, I think, have been let down by the lack of a 2-point super shot.
That's right. And how many people do you know? We know a lot of sports fans, right?
Yeah.
How many sports fans do you know right now that have, either since this announcement, but just generally, if you went, hey, netball's got a new 2-point shot in it, and they go, I'm going to watch it now.
Yeah. Get on board.
I wasn't going to watch it, but this is
a game changer. Literally.
This is what we've been. I've been holding out. I'm now.
Finally, they've seen the light.
I'm going to go buy my Vixens membership
and introduce a super shot.
Sign the kids up. I've got the tattoo. We're all in. It's so ridiculous.
Of course it is.
But these people keep getting jobs. It's amazing.
And I guarantee you, it won't see out the season, this new rule.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets knocked on there before the season.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
You kind of want to have the players on board with this.
Well, you'd think so. I mean, netball players, they wear their position emblazoned on their outfit.
Yeah.
Can we just get a big eye for idiot on every administrator who has to wear that? Yeah. There's your goal attack. There's your goal. Keep
well,
it.
I mean, that's been
your wing attack.
Hasn't been the interesting thing though about Warren Buffett used to say about economic recessions. He said when the tide goes out, that's when you realise who's not wearing any bathers. And hasn't COVID just exposed a bunch of sporting administrators for being just unprepared for any sort of crises like this? I mean, the AFL, as much as we bag them, are by far the best positioned out of all of them.
I mean, as you say, we're first sort of shocked to see that rugby league was, spending $500,000 a day, and you think, well, how?
Yeah.
But Peter V'landys, to his credit, has sort of turned around rugby league. But what has surprised me is when you see the money in Australian cricket and how much they pay their players and how much they make per tour and this, all of a sudden they are absolutely on the bones of their ass, Australian cricket.
Yeah.
And you think, how did that happen?
Well, I mean, a lot of these decisions, the fact that sporting administrators are a bit like teams. They want to win this year, not in 5 years' time. They're not very good at the longer planning stuff that often. They don't, if they can dole out, I mean, the NRL's been in this problem where they've been doling out what was meant to be emergency fund, basically, back to the clubs.
To
who
save
then wasted
clubs.
it. Who wasted it on buying out coaches' contracts and stuff and then paying the next one a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
So you have these things where you kind of like, I mean, the reality is a lot of them are not very good, and the incentives, because everyone I've ever talked to who's worked in business and then gone into a footy role, like board positions or anything like that.
Yep.
And so the most amazing thing is you get all these people who in the corporate world, not the corporate world is the best example of governments ever, but they say a lot of them in the corporate world, they're working in accounting or making widgets. They're the most rational, hardcore business people. They get in a footy and they become 5-year-old fans.
Gibbering idiots, yeah.
They get their passions. They're like, we're going to turn this club around instantly. We're going to do all these things. Or they get in a sports administration and they get caught up that sort of. It's. I think
they become fans again. You see,
yeah,
like captains of industry, as you say, who become board members at footy clubs.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, they're getting really excited about hanging out with the players.
Yeah,
the players don't care about hanging out with board members.
No, like.
But you see it all the time. I've got mates who've done exactly that.
Yeah,
and so, you've just turned into, a 15-year-old. You should be wearing your duffel coat with Peter McKenna's number on the back to your board meeting.
Yeah. Oh, I just got a photo with Matt Rowell. And go, yeah, he's 18. You're 57 and you're a billionaire. Like, who cares? But that's what happens all the time. It's just like, so, but it does show you that a lot of these people, they've also been living in a world for a very long time. It's like the difference between sort of, they've just been showing the Godfather movies on SBS, and they talk about being a wartime consigliere and as opposed to a peacetime one. A lot of these administrators who've been in the game, for 30 years maybe, it's been 30 years of prosperity.
Of good times.
Good times. Like, they talk about the GFC like that was a nightmare, but I mean, that was a walk in the park for most of these guys. Like, so they've been in this real like long-term peacetime of every 4 or 5 years you go back to the broadcasters and get get more money.
Goes higher and higher.
Keeps going higher and higher, and as long as you then. And that gives you money to dole out and cover up a lot of problems. Yeah. And you just keep doing that, rinse and repeat.
Yeah, the never-ending money pit. All of a sudden now somebody's put a cap on it.
Yeah, suddenly. And you and I have talked about how those signs were there long before COVID. I reckon COVID just brought it forward 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, for sure.
It was going to happen anyway. But suddenly they're now going, oh, we don't actually have... And then you realise people are going to look back at this last 20 years, let's say 20 years of sporting administrating, and the massive failure to build, buy assets, control their own destinies, have money, have earning money from. It's going to be damning on you had rivers of gold pouring in and you didn't use it. You just frittered it away.
It's almost like sports bodies and sports should have had a superannuation kind of fund.
Well, the NRL tried to do that.
Yeah.
And they set it up and everything, and then the clubs all argued that they wanted the money, and the board some of the board members left in disgust, and the money all went back to them. It was frittered away, and now they're stuffed. The AFL, in some ways, have been slightly better, but they've also been a bit. It's a combination of luck and slightly better in buying the asset of Etihad.
Yeah.
Marvel Stadium now. That saved them as being able to get a loan. But you would have to argue as well, if you're being completely honest about the AFL, yeah, you did that well and good on you, and that's good, and that saved you. But really, you weren't exactly poor. You weren't exactly like being insanely frugal over the last 20 years. And when you're going and doing international rules, AFLX, pouring money into very top-heavy administrations in club level and in
highly paid administrators across the board and new departments everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of money had been going out the door that could have been being put aside every year, you know. Yeah. So the AFL could have done better, but they've definitely done better than the rest. But yeah, it's not kind of that surprising, but it is. It's these people who have just not ever operated and forget their history that you can have a downturn where you're going to get less money in future years.
Exactly.
And you got to plan for that. And just none of them have done that. It's like if we keep going to the well's bigger every time. It's amazing.
It's going to run
It's a flood. It's not a well. It's a flood. We're fine.
And on that note, hopefully we'll see some football played again next weekend and the weekend after that. But as we said earlier, we're still not sure.
No, so who knows? We'll put this podcast out, but it might be irrelevant.
Yeah, it might be completely wrong. Not that would be a first time.
Well, that's right. Good luck doing tips when you don't even really know who your team's playing.
Yeah.
So on that note, I should say I'm on the front bar tonight if you're listening to this on Wednesday before that's been aired. So
with Brad Hardy.
Brad Hardy is on.
Brownlow medalist Brad Hardy.
Yep. I hope I don't catch coronavirus from him or give it to him. That would be awkward.
Does he still live in Perth?
I think so, yeah.
So he's been able to come over from Perth. Does he have to?
I wonder if he's dialing in or not.
Oh, he might be dialing in. Otherwise, he'd have to. Is it worth going on the front bar to then isolate yourself for 2 weeks in Perth?
Totally. On that note, we will see you next week.